let's try to touch on the RNA world hypothesis, which is this, claim that, since DNA is so complex, maybe things started as RNA and then kaboom, you have coding for things, and you have primordial cells and this stuff. So let me ask you this question as a start. Now, I've been doing my work about looking into this RNA world hypothesis and LUCA and mutations and stuff, and I have been struck by the immense error rate when it comes to RNA replication versus DNA. So my question to you is it possible that there would be life based on RNA? I mean, a cell that does not have DNA at all, not a virus, a living cell that has RNA as its genetic material, given the huge RNA error rate compared to DNA. And I've for example, went into literature and I saw that even after replication, a living cell, due to ultraviolet and other environmental conditions, will have its DNA damaged, and then it gets repaired by repair mechanisms. But there isn't the same thing for RNA. So there is no, up to what I have read, there is no RNA-based living cell today. So how come somebody would speculate that there were RNA-based living things at some point of time? As a chemist, do you think there can be a stable living cell that has no DNA whatsoever and only has RNA as its basic material, genetics? Is this possible? Did you see it?
I don't see it. Many people have suggested it. Other people, including many scientists, materialistic scientists, are saying that can't be. The problem with RNA, well, first of all, RNA is more complex than DNA is, in that each one of the bases is hooked up to a sugar that has one more stereogenic center than that in DNA. So it's actually more complex than is DNA. RNA is. It's not simpler, it's more complex. But the problem with RNA is its shelf life is very short. I'm talking on the order of minutes. So if, for example, you look, minutes.
Versus how much in DNA? Versus how much just so we feel the comparison.
DNA can be under the right conditions can be thousands of years.
Okay, so minutes versus thousands of years.
Yeah. I mean, and RNA. Now, if you take both in an aqueous system, DNA is many orders of magnitude more stable than is RNA, because RNA will self-decompose. So just by itself, the 2' hydroxyl comes around and hits the leaving group on the 3' hydroxyl and breaks the chain. Number two is the fact that you have both the 2' and the 3' can assemble. And when you hook together via the 2', it's not innocuous. It makes what's called siRNA, small interfering RNA, which slows down, which binds up to other RNAs and stops the replication process. So it's really deleterious. But this is why, for example, these vaccines, you have Moderna and Pfizer. One of them, Pfizer, was originally stored at minus 80 degrees centigrade, but now they've packaged it in a liposome or in a lipid layer to try to protect it, but still it has to be stored at 0 degrees and used very rapidly. This stuff has to be used very rapidly because the shelf life is very short. And that's only because it's packaged and there are things in there that and you have to keep it totally free of other ions. How do you do that in an environment? Our environment is full of sodium, full of magnesium. You have magnesium around. Magnesium is a big problem with these things. And so these things are unstable. So RNA is unstable. But plus, you don't have the information. Just hooking a bunch of nucleotides together and claiming that that's RNA. No, that's not RNA. That's like taking computer code and just vomiting it out there, just randomly, putting do loops here and there. I mean, it doesn't do you any good. There has to be some code behind it. So this gets into your area.
Yeah, I need to stop you here because this is my next question. So it says, I just remember this quote of yours, and it's like that you make molecules for a living. So my question to you, since you make molecules for a living, and this must need so much information about what molecule and what function, how might RNA-based precursors could have acquired the needed information? And as a chemist who builds nano machines, do you see maybe there is some experiment in chemistry that is encouraging people that you would put some RNA in a test tube and, fast forward the reaction and wait until it produces a nanocar or something? Do you use trial and error to create these things like genetic algorithms, or this is, complete science fiction?
Yeah, so our RNA has a very short shelf life. So even when it's made, it's decomposing much more rapidly than the thing is made. So that's one problem. But the other problem is the ordering, the sequence of these. That's the informational code. Nobody knows where that came from. Could you have information from randomness? The answer is yes. It's called Shannon information. But Shannon information does not give you the specified information that you need to construct a cell. Shannon information grabs these pieces of randomness, but informaticians have clearly said that this Shannon-like information, which comes from information science when you're dealing with radio signals, that random type of grabbing this embedded information in randomness is not sufficient. You have to have what's called specified information in order to build cellular structure. So we don't know where the information came from. And you say, well, one randomly formed and happened to have the information. Okay, but what happens in 5 minutes when several of those pieces have been broken up? Now what? So that information is gone. And the chances of reassembling that become really, really small. So we're talking about the chances of assembling a viable RNA, something like 1/10⁻40th. I mean, the numbers are so vanishingly small. So say one forms, its shelf life is very short, its half-life is very short, and then if it had the informational code, within minutes that informational code is going to be lost, never to ever form again. That's it. That's it. Even in the lifetime of the universe, a scientific lifetime of the universe, when you have 1/10⁻40th, it's just too short. It's just too short. And so the problem there is information. And then even if you were to take RNA, so you have one strand of RNA, what's that going to do? Can that strand of RNA make for you then the peptide that you need to do the enzymatic assembly? You can't have RNA start building peptides by itself. It has to have exogenous other enzymes assisting it to do that. And you have to have all these other peptides available to it with the right stereochemistry. It can't be achiral. It all has to be chiral. And you can't do these chemical assemblies just like that. I mean, you have to have enzymes that help you to do this. So all of this is a real problem.
So let's say, number one, it has no objective function, so it doesn't know what it wants to create. And number two, even if it creates something, it doesn't have memory, so it loses it so fast to the extent it starts from scratch. And since it doesn't know what it's going to create, so it has no direction. So only somebody who is really not throwing long shots, but super long shots, would think of this. Would you agree to this statement?
Yeah, I'd agree in the sense that there is no end game here. Molecules, as I've often said, do not care about life. They're not moving toward life. Molecules have never been known to move toward life. Organisms, living organisms, move toward life. Molecules do not move toward life. They actually move away from life. They move to a far more disordered state. And so this is not what molecules move toward. Just the simple self-assemblies that you get, the self-assemble monolayer, those are regular patterns, A, B, A, B, A, B. They're not the non-regular patterns that you need to create life. If you deal in systems, I mean, you can't build any complexity through regular patterns of A, or A, B. You have to have non-regular patterns. We have non-regular patterns within our DNA that give us this complexity of life. You can't build this complexity just with regular patterns that you would get from a thermodynamic self-assembly.